It has been a really long time since I discussed Ashes of Creation, and there is a very good, very valid reason for that. Now, my last video on it was all the way back in August 2018. Yeah, almost 2 whole years ago. I'm a huge fan of Ashes of Creation. The game looks very promising. I'd been excited for its release and even its alpha and beta tests for quite a while now. Oh, wow. Wow, did I actually sound like that back then? What, what was even going on? Maybe at the time I was sick or something? I don't know, do you guys ever remember me sounding like that? Since then, I have pretty much left the game alone, and this is due to 2 different reasons. The first is the fact that they showed an unusual obsession with their Apocalypse Battle Royale game mode. Now, I know a lot of you were actually really heavily triggered by this and probably lost interest in the game overall. Me personally, I am not a fan of Battle Royale games, and as such, this provided really nothing of interest to me. Or to a lot of you guys actually, since I know a lot of you probably backed it due to the MMO aspect. Second is due to the fact that they just really hadn't done much, nor did they have much to show for the MMO. Now, again, in August 2018, I did do a video where I discussed my thoughts on the game at that time, especially after they'd announced a partnership with My.com at the time to publish the game within Europe. Wait, do you guys hear that? That is a really low flying helicopter. Like, that flew so low to the ground, it was unreal. A lot has changed since then with the reveal of a brand new, almost 2-hour-long gameplay trailer, so I thought it was the ideal time to delve a lot deeper into this, to actually take some time to research it as opposed to taking, I don't know, like 5 minutes and then throwing in my opinions based off of that. Before we go any further though, I would like to preface this by stating that the footage that you're seeing, the footage that has been released from Intrepid Studios, is pre-alpha footage. This isn't taken from the full alpha, this isn't taken from the fully functional version of the game that we're going to receive, and you know what? Honestly, it's shaping up to look pretty solid. Now, for those of you unaware of what the game is, Ashes of Creation is an upcoming subscription-based medieval fantasy MMORPG. It is honestly one of the most highly anticipated Western MMOs coming out in the foreseeable future. The game initially rolled out onto Kickstarter in 2017, and over the course of the campaign went on to raise almost $3.3 million. That is probably the most I've seen raised for an MMO outside of Star Citizen. The devs have claimed that the game would bring the massive back to massively multiplayer, providing players with an incredibly detailed, large open world with endless freedom to do what you want, to play how you want, without the constraints present in MMOs in this day and age. The world lives and grows around you, there is consequence to every action. Towns, cities, entire civilizations are run and ruled by players. The economy is directly influenced by us. Everything, the entire game, is player driven. And that is why the game has garnered as much attention as it had, and why players have been anticipating this game with bated breath. And while that all sounds great on paper, how does it actually translate into the game? Okay, so let's start this off here with the obvious. Graphics. Graphically, the game is beginning to look pretty good. I know that there are going to be some of you that disagree with this, but this is my opinion. Granted, it is a far cry from competing with an Eastern MMO for sure, but the goal with Western MMOs has never been, nor do I believe it will ever be, to be graphically competitive with an Eastern MMO. However, the environments that I saw during the video were better than pretty much any other indie developed MMO. But that's just the environment. The character movements have always been an issue to me. Back in Apocalypse, the character animations were pretty bad, and while they've obviously improved since the early Apocalypse look, I can say with certainty that both the running and the combat animations still need quite a bit of work, as do the flying animations, or rather the mount animations in general. Monster movement seemed to function pretty well, and the special effects for abilities and spells look fantastic, so graphically, the game definitely has a lot going for it. The environment, even the armor, actually went a little ways to remind me a bit of an Elder Scrolls game. I'm not sure if you guys get a similar feel from this, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But I mean, being compared to an Elder Scrolls game is in no way an insult, it's actually more of a compliment. Steven, whose perspective were actually shown in the video, was playing the Mage Class. There are currently 8 different classes available. the tank, the cleric, the fighter, the rogue, the ranger, the bard, the summoner, and the mage. I can't say with certainty what the other staff are playing, but from what I've gathered concerning the game and from what is visible in the gameplay trailer itself, the combat is definitely tab target, and I guarantee you a lot of people are going to, once again, be highly triggered by this. I mean, the combat doesn't look bad, but then I'm a fan of WoW's combat, and I don't find an issue with Final Fantasy XIV's combat at endgame. Early and mid-game, though, in Final Fantasy XIV, sure, I know that there are a lot of issues with speed and global cooldowns, but endgame, no, definitely not. And from the perspective of the mage, it looks as though you have enough AoE abilities where the tab target aspect of your class really won't be much of an issue. I know, why are you using tab target combat in an MMO that's released after 2020? Tab target combat is dead. How is this going to compete with an MMO like Black Desert Online? I guarantee you that is what the comment section is going to be filled with. I know that the comment section in various different Ashes of Creation videos, I know the comment section in a lot of Reddit threads are filled with similar opinions. I mean, the amount of hate that some people have for the tab target genre when two of the largest, most populated MMOs are both tab target is unreal. Honestly, the combat is probably one of the better looking parts of the game right now, with the spellcasting animation still needing a lot of work, especially for the melee classes though. During their video, they also wanted to touch on the social and political facets of the game. We got to see one of the many towns you're going to no doubt see around. We got to see an instance of player housing. We got to see some of the political functions like citizenship, construction of the mayor office, building of the city itself, voting, various different crafting NPCs, and buildings like the blacksmith. Granted, a lot of the game and a lot of the features are still heavily under construction, so while the features are definitely present in game, they are far from being fully functional as one would expect. Not much in the way of PvP was shown, unfortunately. There was the caravan escort that ended up being ambushed by other players, forcing Steven and his group into PvP. And you know what? From what I saw, either the mage itself is incredibly powerful, or Steven himself was, because the mage was going around and it was literally two-tapping everyone. Now, I'm a little concerned for balancing in PvP, and this is probably going to be a prevalent issue in the game. Balance, especially regarding the mage class in pretty much any MMO, is always an issue. I can't say that I know an MMO that actually has fair balancing in PvP. Other forms of PvP weren't shown, but it functioned primarily like any PvE encounter. And since it does happen out in the open world, you also have monsters to deal with as well, making for some pretty intense PvPvE action. At one point in the video, they'd opted to tackle an open world dungeon. I believe the Elder Scrolls Online also does something similar to this as well, providing players the option to group together and tackle dungeons with other groups that aren't partied together. This is a very interesting mechanic to me, one that outside of ESO, I have never actually participated in. I'm not sure what the maximum number of players are per instance, but it seemed as though there were quite a few grouped up at the beginning of it. After that dungeon, they decided to go ahead and fight the Pyroclastic worm raid boss. For this, I'm going to assume that they had the 40 players as a raid itself, and subsequently the raid boss encounter requires 40 players to fight. I can't imagine them scaling the boss down for a smaller group in the pre-alpha test, but from what I could see, the raid looked pretty traditional. Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed, not really all that much, because I didn't really see any mechanics outside of keep hitting the boss while avoiding his flame brat, so I'm hoping that they have mechanics planned for bosses. To me and to MRSSTIX, my wife, learning difficult boss encounters in raids like Mythic raids in World of Warcraft or Savage raids in Final Fantasy XIV is some of the most rewarding content, some of the most rewarding experiences you can have in an MMO, especially concerning group content. But again, as this is the pre-alpha, their goal could very well have been just to show off exactly how much of the game they've managed to complete up until this point. So instead of having like a fully scripted boss encounter, they just wanted to show that they had the entire raid and the dungeons themselves set up with basic scripting for the bosses, and that would be perfectly fine. I have no idea. One of the final things that they showcased in the trailer was the Brood Queen world boss. Yeah, I mean, what would an open world game be without a world boss or 10, right? Much like the Worm, the Brood Queen didn't really do much and was down with little to no effort, which, I don't know, is a little disconcerting once again for me. Like, don't get me wrong, there were actual mechanics. There was an AoE that it would do, ads would spawn periodically, but I mean, other than that, it pretty much just stood there meleeing whoever was tanking. Now, all in all, I can definitely say that the encounters need work, at least pertaining to the difficulty in my opinion. But, you know, once again, the AI is far from being in a complete form, and it would be wrong for me, for anyone really, to base the encounters, the difficulty, or the game off of this pre-alpha stage of early development. Now, in closing, I can definitely say this about Ashes of Creation. The game is definitely coming along quite well, a lot better than I had originally thought it would. It definitely still needs a lot of work, but I mean, that's to be expected considering the point in development that it's at. I'm excited to see how development of the game continues over time and to see the kind of game it ultimately ends up becoming if they ever finally manage to complete it. My main concern is the business model, though, as pretty much every MMO outside of WoW or Final Fantasy XIV has had to adopt a non-pay-to-play model to survive, and I don't really see Ashes of Creation ever dominating either of the aforementioned games. But that's just my opinion, my first impressions of the game right now. What do you guys think though? Let me know down in the comments below and let's talk about it. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Peace.